And since you're lost and you can't turn to the one person that you should be able to turn to, you turn into the kids.
Lonely place to be.
It's a lonely place to be, exactly what I was getting to. Mm-hmm. A lonely, lost place. So you turn to the kids as a distraction. So, when you turn into your kids to fill your own needs selfishly rather than just to be there lovingly for your children, that's a problem, right? You're creating a codependent relationship with your children that they didn't ask for, and that's not fair for them.
Create a date or create like a walk or whatever, time for just you guys without the kids around to be like, hey, I really just wanted to check in with you.
The three entities in a marriage. There's me, there's you, there's a third entity which is the marriage, our relationship. And it's our job to protect that third entity at all costs. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the TPM Show. And once again, for the last round for this session, I am joined by my beautiful wife, Erin. Erin, thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's great having you here on these shows. I love the insight that you give the men, and it gives me a lot to think about as well. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Today, what I want to talk about, and I know we haven't planned this at all, but I know guys commonly complain about, they'll say, Doug, my wife always sides with the kids or always turns into the kids and not me. And I feel like I'm being left out. Let's talk a little bit about that. I have a perspective on that. And I think we have, I know you and I have a shared perspective because we've talked about it. Mm-hmm. But why don't you give me your viewpoint on this of what could be happening and perhaps what could change. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about our viewpoints on this.
Okay. I think there's a couple different viewpoints to go from. Let's start with like biologically, what does happen. To grow a human, birth a human, potentially have a human live off you if you're breastfeeding, there's an insane amount of hormonal changes that are required to allow that beautiful process to happen. And also a woman having diffuse awareness, like it is kind of how babies stay alive. I'm not saying men are not capable. That is not what I'm saying. I'm literally talking about biologically. It's how we can have a baby that we're on our nipple, breastfeeding while we're holding, while we're stirring the pasta for the toddler that is overflowing. The toddler is screaming and needs whatever he needs. So we go over there, get them a cup of water, make sure that the other food doesn't burn. That's for the adult. I mean, literally so many things at once, so many needs being met at once. So it's like our brain can handle that. It is not saying it is taxing and very stressful, but we can handle doing that and keep everybody alive. And have everybody's needs met and make them feel loved and cared for and have our attention, all the things we want to install in being like a good mother in general. So, but with that comes many, many, many changes in hormones. And if she is breastfeeding, naturally there's just an incredible release of oxytocin. It's one of the best feelings I've ever felt. Like it's really, really a large dose of oxytocin comes in. And it is actually kind of required because if you think about particularly a newborn phase and everything, how much, if she's solely breastfeeding, that woman is up and awake, like it doesn't make sense. Like there's no way on earth anybody would choose to do that. It is very taxing, but it is the bond and the oxytocin that is released, the bond between, I'm just saying healthy versions of mom and baby relationship happening are very, very strong. And that's what keeps that baby alive. So that's just like a biological phase. And did you want to share anything about that from a man's side?
Nope.
Okay. Also all that. And also I just want to give like a grace because I know when we stepped into parenthood,
we were going to be perfect parents.
Oh yeah. We have lots of ideas how we're going to be perfect parents. Then,
no screen time.
Yeah. And then you're in it and you're like, oh, this is hard. So there's a huge learning curve to being a couple and having your dynamic and the way you do things and the way you schedule things and the freedom and how life is to then becoming parents. It's the biggest blessing, the best thing I've ever done, and the fucking hardest. And it was tumultuous for us for a while because it changes everything. And like I mentioned, those hormones, like after every birth, your woman is a different woman. She's not the same. It's one of the biggest portals that any female that grows and births a human goes through. Like it's indescribable how different you are. And that right there, I know I went through this. A lot of my clients go through this. Not everybody, but it can be a beautiful time, but also a really wobbly time. Your identity changes. I know I went through a huge period of like, who am I now? I know I'm a mother and these things, but it's a time of the mother is also being born again. And I don't think that's talked about enough or known enough to know how to manage it. So yeah, I just wanted to say like becoming parents is the best thing and it's really hard. So, and it takes a lot of intention to keep a strong marriage when you're also wanting to be really good parents and raise your children really well. You want to add that?
Yeah, I'm going to take it a different angle here.
Yeah.
So typically the way I look at it is when there's struggles in the marriage between the couple, the man and the woman, the woman who tends to be the caregiver most usually, right? The primary caretaker of the house or of the family and the kids. And if her needs aren't getting met through her husband, a lot of women, and men can do this too, by the way, but a lot of women can become codependent on their children to meet those needs. And when their children are young, before the teenage years, that's very easy to do because they'll reciprocate, kind of like a dog. You know, parents, couples will do this as well. If they don't have kids, or even if they have kids, if they have a dog in the house, right, the man will tend to turn to the dog, right, because the dog's always happy to see him when he walks in the door, where the wife is not. So the woman will do this because she'll get her love and affection from the kids if she doesn't feel like she's getting it from her husband. And so when fights occur, she feels emotionally unsafe, like we talked about in a previous podcast. She'll turn to the children to get those needs met, the security and what have you, the quote unconditional love. The problem is, well, there's a lot of problems with that, but one of the problems is when the kids leave the house, that unconditional love, that safety is gone. And that's when a lot of divorces can happen, is right there for a lot of reasons going through there. The other thing is when that is happening, your wife may be turning to the kids also just to prove that, you know, she's right, again, getting the needs met, getting that love, getting that tank filled. Now, it's something that you and I do consciously is we think of it as how can we show our kids a healthy relationship? So the way you and I do it, we talk about the three entities, but either way, it's our relationship comes before the kids, which is tough to do.
We've really had to work on that. We've gone in and out of it.
Yeah, it's tough to do because they're little kids. You want to protect them. Sometimes it's just easier. Sometimes I'm pissed at you for whatever reason, whatever you did wrong. You know, it's a whole nother podcast. You know, and so I'll go hang out with the kids and play with them. You know, and again to prove to myself that I'm a good dad or fill my cup or whatever it is. And it's really an immature way of going about it. And so that's what I think our society has allowed women in particular to turn to the kids as an acceptable way of hiding.
Yeah. And on another podcast too, I agree with things you said. There is this whole thing of women, I've shared about women being very adaptable, and we will, if we are not aware or conscious or intentional or set up proper support systems so that we do get our needs met and have those conversations, we adapt so much meeting everybody else's needs that we do not meet our own and we disappear.
Yeah.
And that leads to a whole slew of things, but most commonly it can just be like we're so removed and disconnected from ourselves and it feels awful, but we don't know how to stop that cycle. And it can lead to like depressions, feeling blue, feeling sad, feeling bitter, angry, resentful, all those things that are just not that fun to feel. But also at the same time, how to like kind of course correct and come back to ourselves is like a lot of women I work with. And I work through myself of like, who am I now? I mentioned earlier. And really taking responsibility for the person that is responsible for your own love, knowing your own worth, knowing how to be in your own femininity, knowing how to know what your needs are now, because they're probably different than they were pre-kids, and how to support yourself in getting your needs met. And that's going to require conversations, a lot more planning than it used to. It's going to require a partnership where your partner's on board, because having anybody's needs met, it usually means somebody else might be inconvenienced.
Yeah.
But the alternative is, if you have a partner who's never having the experience of having her needs met, that is not a happy woman.
No. And that's a whole nother podcast we can go down.
So it's a really, once you do become parents, doesn't matter how many kids, dynamics change. Like, it's really big. I would call it a skill set for women in particular to relearn what their needs are and how to meet them.
Yeah.
And set up structures and support so that she can go away for a weekend or whatever it is. She can go to the Tuesday and Thursday night dance class because it lights her soul up. It might not be convenient. And having a woman that feels whole and happy is.
Yeah. And another reason she might be turning into her kids is certainty. And let me tell a story about this if I can. I remember when our son was born. Our son was born. We only have one. When he was born, on his wrist had his name and your name, not mine. Right? Why? It's because the doctors know for certain that he's your kid. They're not certain it's my kid. Right? It could be a million other men that could be, his father, his biological father. But they know for certain that it's yours. And so for women, the same thing applies in the marriage, right? So she may be uncertain that you're sticking around, but she has a level of certainty that her children will stick around, right? It's a false sense of security, but it is a sense of security that a women can get that will cause them to turn in to that, to their kids, because they're like, okay, well, he may leave me, or I may leave him, or whatever the story is. We may not be together, but the kids will be here. Therefore, I'll turn into the children.
Pour everything into them.
Yes.
Yep.
That's a recipe for disaster.
Right. I was going to say, which then will.
Yeah. Kids going to go to college. Kids are going to. My parents were just visiting.
Yeah.
Right. I don't talk to them all that much time, and that is going to go away for her eventually. But either way, that the couple is missing the two.
There. Yeah.
Right. And we talk about, when we coach, and we've learned along our journeys, the three entities in a marriage. There's me, there's you, and there's a third entity which is with the marriage, our relationship. And it's our job to protect that third entity at all costs, including the children. And so that's a really, really important thing, hence date nights and things that we try to do and put in practice. And I think a lot of times the wife is going to turn into the kids because, again, her needs aren't getting met. There's uncertainty in the marriage, but there's certainty in the kids, and she's not protecting herself or that third entity.
Yeah, and you hit on it before, is like, we've worked really hard at relearning how to do our marriage once we're parents, and remembering, like, I've said this, I'll say this till I'm blue in the face. I think two of the biggest gifts we can give our children is, like, you're responsible for your own happiness, like a happy mom and a happy dad. Like, they aren't responsible for your happiness. And also
Correct. Yeah.
that you are, like you hit on before, like, showing them how a healthy marriage can operate, because they're imprinting off of us, of how the type of partners they may choose.
Yeah.
So it's really important. Like, we're not perfect. Nobody is. To learn how to repair well, to learn how to come back together, to say, hey, what we've been doing the past 2 years isn't working. Let's do something different. Let's come back together as a team and put down the swords. Like, so it's like taking responsibility. Like, all marriages, long-term partnerships, we're going to go off course. Just are. So learning how to come back together, and our kids are always watching. We know this. I mean, just like simple things. The other day, like, my daughter, I was laying with her as she was getting to go to sleep, and I was just staring at the ceiling for a minute after we were cuddling, and I just kind of went like this, and I don't even know what I was thinking about. I just went like this, and out of the corner of my eye, I see her. She had been looking at me, and she goes like this.
So you're rubbing your nose for the guys
just like
listening
little
to this.
things, yeah, that you can't see. So it's like a little tiny example, but they're constantly absorbing our energy, our tones, the way mommy and daddy are interaction, and even when they're older. So this is a super common thing. Particularly, we're talking about the women turning towards the kids. That was a question asked.
Yep.
We gave them reasons why, and also like course correcting this for everybody it will bring much more joy and happiness and harmony into the home.
Yeah. And you got to protect the entity of the marriage. I was talking to a guy who basically was saying, my wife's very alpha. I hear that all the time, like very aggressive. And when she's not happy with me, she comes at me, and then I go, well, what do you do? Well, he was like, well, I go to my garage and just work. I work in the workshop in the garage. He has a 3-year-old daughter, this guy I'm thinking of. And I said, yep. And then I go, every time, you get hurt, you don't want to, ruffle feathers or anything. So you just go in the garage and work, don't you? He's like, yeah, every time. I go, every time your wife is upset at you or you're doing something that she doesn't like, she pushes you a little bit. So, because she knows you'll go in the garage. He's like, yeah, that's true. I go, and your daughter's watching. He's like, yeah, she is. I go, do you want your daughter to grow up with a husband that just runs away when things get hard? He goes, no. And what he said, he started to tear up. He's like, that is the reason I'm in the program, the activation method. He's like, I want to show my daughter the kind of man that I want her to marry. I go, and we started talking, and other guys jumped in, but I think it's important for men is if you have kids, I don't care how old the kids are, your sons are going to act like you and your daughters are going to marry a guy like you, right? And so when you think of it that way, do you want a man that's to be with your daughter, to protect you, to hold your daughter's heart that's not activated, that's going to run, that's going to flip-flop, that's not going to be consistent? Do you want that man to protect your daughter's heart? Or do you want your son to be that man, live with those fears and live in a life of quiet desperation? I don't care how old you are. You can change it. You can come back, get activated. I've seen it with men from as early as late 20s all the way into their late 60s that have come through our program and have done that and flipped the script. We had one guy who reconnected with his wife. I'll share this real quick anecdote. And his daughter in her late 40s sent him a letter saying that this was the number one thing that he could have ever done. His wife passed away, unfortunately. The number one thing he could ever done for his daughter. He rekindled the relationship with his daughter. She's in her late 40s. She's got kids. They didn't talk, did not talk. They did not have a good relationship. He was able to turn it around in his late 60s and change that relationship. Now he has a relationship with his grandkids, etc. And the reason I bring that up is, as I think some guys think it's too late. Like, oh, she just is all in with the kids. She always sides with the kids. Sit down and have a conversation with your wife. You and I sat down and had a conversation about protecting the third entity at all costs. And sometimes we have to come back to it because it's easy to slip out of it.
Super easy.
Yeah, you're busy. Like date nights sometimes. I mean, to be fair, sometimes our date nights are, we just want to chill out. We're both just dead tired. I'd love to say they're always chef dinners and these amazing, things that we do. And sometimes they are, but sometimes it's just chilling. But you got to carve out time to do that, and you got to carve out time to have those conversations.
Yep. And actually, now that you say that, I don't know if you heard this. We were on a date night last night, and the daughter of the owner of the restaurant, who is a grown woman, has her own family, said, "Yeah, we're talking about some of the artwork her dad did," and she's like, "Yeah, he's amazing. He's the man that let me know what type of man I'm going to marry."
Yeah.
And so
I didn't hear her say that.
She said that last night. Yeah.
Yeah. I told her that he's the type of guy I want to be.
Yeah.
He's an amazing guy, man.
So great.
We talked about it. And all of us guys want to be that guy, right? That people are talking about in that manner. And he's just a solid dude. So yeah, you got to think about that. So if your wife is turning towards the kids and siding with the kids, you need to go have a conversation together, a clearing conversation. And the key here, in my opinion, and I always joke about this because when you and I used to have finance conversations, I'd show up with spreadsheets and everything, and it's very serious. And they never worked. And the times they have worked is when I've made them fun, made them lighter, right? It's the same thing with this. It doesn't have to be a super serious conversation. It's a serious conversation, but it doesn't have to have that tone. Yeah. It doesn't have to have the tone of the boardroom or the courtroom. It can have a tone of just lightness of hey, what do we want? Yeah. How do we want our kids to grow up? And that's a really good way for the guys if you want to talk to your wife about changing things in the home and you're having problems, instead flip the script and say, how do we want our children to grow up? Because then you have a commonality you can start with.
Yeah. I think that's really good. And also, like, I work with a lot of women on this, and like it comes from a different angle that I already kind of hit on, but like, no, she is turning to those kids, probably struggling in the marriage, hurting.
Yeah.
Underneath all of this is hurt for both you guys, right?
For sure.
But there is probably an element of she's feeling lost.
Yeah.
She's lost herself. So remembering, helping her just have those conversations, and that's kind of a tender place to be, to feel like you've lost yourself. It's not like an amazing place.
No.
But it's also, it feels like when you're in it, sometimes it's like, I don't even know how to make this change. So it's like having conversations about like just asking her, tune in, like, what do you need now? Like, and she might not know right away, because when you're disconnected from yourself, you might not know. So I will work with a lot of women on literally remembering how to come back to themselves, and that they get to have needs and they get to get them met. And that actually her honoring her needs will bring her back to be the mother and wife that she actually wants to be, because nobody can be the best version of themselves without having their cup filled, their needs met, basic needs even.
That's a really good point. I didn't even consider till you just said it came to me. Is I would imagine if it's hard because like you're right here, my wife, but my other wife, if you're lost and we didn't have if we had the old relationship we had whatever years ago it was, you probably wouldn't feel confident enough to share that with me because it wouldn't be safe. So you'd be kind of fumbling by yourself, lost, right?
Yep.
A rudderless ship, if you will, at sea. Mm-hmm. And since you're lost and you can't turn to the one person that you should be able to turn to, you turn into the kids.
Lonely place to be.
It's a lonely place to be, exactly what I was getting to. Mm-hmm. A lonely, lost place. So you turn to the kids as a distraction, as your sense of purpose. My purpose is these kids. My purpose is mom.
Which is, I mean, it's a beautiful thing, and we're not knocking that.
No, but what we're knocking, well, I'm knocking anyway, is the reason you do it.
Yeah.
Are you doing it for good reasons or bad reasons? Right? That's what I'm talking about. So, when you turn into your kids to fill your own needs selfishly rather than just to be there lovingly for your children, that's a problem, right? You're creating a codependent relationship with your children that they didn't ask for, and that's not fair for them. I say you. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about
anybody.
My other wife, the make-believe one.
And on that, in just like a different, like men in general, masculine, you guys have a very strong relationship to your basic needs.
Yeah.
It's very different for us. And so like in the same way, like I mentioned in a previous podcast that we have feminine, like our female, we have a very strong connection to the eternal. It just is like, and it's equivalent to your relationship to your needs. So for like, maybe this just gives insight to at least one person right now that like, if she's feeling lost and constantly turning to the kids and it just doesn't seem like herself and doesn't have that life force that she used to, she probably is very disconnected from herself and has lost herself in motherhood, even though it's what she might have wanted most. And I went through this walk even after the second baby. It's a really sacred time, and it's also a really challenging time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would imagine. A really challenging time.
Yeah.
So let's give the guys, you give one, I'll give one. What's one thing they can do now if they're finding themselves in this situation, they're relating to this, and they're saying, hey, look, my wife keeps turning to the kids, siding with the kids or turning to them. What can I do?
I like what you said, where you can create a neutral ground in a way by saying like create a date or create like a walk or whatever, time for just you guys without the kids around to be like, hey, I really just wanted to check in with you. Like let's talk about what we want and how we're raising our children, what we want to show them in our household, and just start to in a neutral place so that hopefully she doesn't feel defensive or activated or like she needs to defend her role. and just allow her to know, like, this is a safe place to land. I imagine, just say, like, I imagine transitioning to motherhood has been wonderful and challenging for you, as it has for me becoming a father. So us becoming parents together, like, let's talk about how we want to do this and how we can improve our marriage, and just come from a vulnerable place. She's going to feel your energy, and it's not from like, you're right or she's wrong or any of that hoopla. Just like, for the act of partnership, coming together. Yeah, I just said the word hoopla. I don't know where that came from.
From your pattern.
Any of that shit. Just like, it's just put down the fucking sword. Like, literally just show up with, in your power, open, masculine heart. What you want is more connection. So if you show up with that as your intention, energy, and goal, like, that's a start.
It's a great start, and it's similar to what I was going to say. Is I'm going to say, don't run away, step in. Mm-hmm. And so what I mean by that for the guys listening is, if your wife sides with the kids or your wife turns into the kids, instead of throwing up your hands in the air and walking away pouting, step in. If you're in that type of relationship, pull her in, let her know that you care and you love her. And also, it's a bonus one is, if you're in that space, you understand how to do it well, set a boundary with her about how you're going to be with the kids. Like, hey, babe, look, I love you. I love our kids, and our marriage has to come first because we are the example for our kids. And it doesn't matter, again, how old your kids are. In my experience, our kids are young, obviously, but working with thousands of men and you working with women, we've learned over the time that, again, your kids could be in their 40s and they're still watching. Even if you don't talk to them for 20 years, they're somehow watching. They're tuned to you. And you can make the difference as a man. You can be activated, step into your role, and be the wolf. The wolf, again, is an acronym we use at TPM for wise, open, loving, and fierce. The fierceness is courage, because it's easy to run away into the garage. It's easy to go hide. Stepping into it is the fierceness. But you also have to do it while you're open and loving. And that's the key, is combining those ingredients, the wise, open, loving, and fierce together. That gives you the power, the inner power to be in the storm.
Yeah, something else just came up for me. And also, like, it's super common, like, each person in the partnership, if you're not coming together to talk about this thing that is an issue, right? We can each sit back in our own corner and then start creating all these negative stories about our partner. And then that's the perception we see our partner through over and over and over again. I actually had a conversation with a man about this a little while ago. But just stop and think about also, like, what's the story you're telling yourself about your partner in your head over and over again? She's so she's such a he does this, he doesn't do this, all the things. And it's just like, catch yourself. Those negative thoughts are actually impacting your energy, the way you speak, the tone, how you show up or not show up more than you realize. So
True.
Correct that stinking thinking.
Correct that stinking thinking and all that hoopla. Awesome. Well, babe, as always, thanks so much for taking your time. I know you got a lot on your schedule.
You're welcome. Thanks for
having me. Take care of our
me.
family and our kids and your clients. So I appreciate what you do for the movement and the men that get a chance to listen to this and their families.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Gentlemen, as I always say, in the moment of insight, take massive action. If you're finding yourself in this deer mode, defending, excusing, explaining, reacting, get activated. Become the wolf, wise, open, loving, and fierce, so you can handle these with dignity, with pride, and virtue, right? That's what we really want. And you can step into this and have these conversations like Erin and I have. They're open and honest and lead from the heart and love. We still get in arguments, but those arguments that used to be 2 weeks of disconnect, as I always say, are now mere seconds, unless my teenager kicks in, which it does from time to time. And sometimes you don't want to repair it right away. But again, it's a big difference to be able to go from upset to connection in a matter of seconds or minutes versus days. It changes everything, not only for you, not only for your partner, but also for your family and those around you. And I want that for you guys. And if that's something you're interested in and learning more about, just get on a phone call with one of our advisors. They'll just walk you through the process. That's over at thepowerfulman.com. That's thepowerfulman.com/apply now. And you can find out more information. Just see if it's the right fit for you. But whatever you do, take action. Don't go from one podcast to another. take action today. Today is the time to draw the line in the sand and take massive action. Until next time, we'll see you on the TPM Show.